Hello guys, I'm really, really happy here. We're gonna talk about coaching skills for doctors specifically, and we're
Sorry?
in presence of one in the audience, so all the bad things I'm gonna say about doctors, you're absolutely fine with, right? I'll try to make it not so negative about doctors, but actually negative about the communication of doctors, which I think is what we're gonna talk about and how we can fix it. Once my clicker works. Um, I'll start with a little bit of introduction about myself in case you've missed it yesterday. I'm originally from Greece. I moved to the UK, spent a lot of my life there in different places. I worked, I studied, I went to Procter & Gamble, and that's where I did a business role, but I also got introduced to coaching in the leadership development space. So I ended up actually by day running Ariel detergent or Ariel Waschmittel for those of you in Germany. My claim to fame is actually launched Lenov Waschmittel in Germany. So I don't know if anyone is into detergents specifically, but I was fascinated by the coaching program that P&G had, which ended up effectively being my night job. And my passion was to actually help train coaching skills for leaders. And seeing the impact that this had on the organization is fundamentally the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing today. I moved from that to another big business called Walgreens Boots Alliance. I ran the global healthcare there, so I got very much involved in health tech and data. It was a fascinating process to see a business that did not do much coaching, and how do you actually bring something to a business that doesn't have any coaching culture, and learn a lot there. I built a health tech business that was acquired by Holland & Barrett in the UK, and being an entrepreneur, I was in an AI conference quite a few years ago where people were talking about AI replacing us all. That was the main theme, which has happened in many AI conferences. And my fundamental process was like, what about the things that AI cannot replace? What about the things that are and will remain human? And I think a lot of what we're going to talk about will remain human. Can AI help us become better at those things? A little bit about the key questions that Ovida, which is the business that I found, is answering. Number one, in a world of ever-evolving AI, what is really human, specifically in coaching skills? And after all the coaching books you've seen over the last 2 days, I would imagine that at least some of you have that question. Number two, how can AI help us democratize coaching skills? We talk a lot about coaching, and generally coaching conferences, we talk a lot about coaching. For me, the discussion is even more powerful when we're talking about the coaching skills and how we can get people, including our clients, to actually demonstrate more of these coaching skills at work. In this case, we're going to talk about doctors. How can AI help us create objective data, objective measures? As humans, we cannot really improve what we cannot measure. And for me, most of coaching, traditional coaching that happens today is a black box. How do you know if a leader in the business that I've brought in 50 coaches and they are delivering amazing results from our organization? No one knows. How do I know if my leaders have coaching skills? The best thing I can do is measure this on a survey. So can AI help us with that? And ultimately, can it actually really measure real in the world behavioral change? And that's what we're doing here. A bit of for the business as well. We've been around, we're not technically a startup, we've been around for a few years. These are the type of organizations that we're working with. Very happy to be working with NYU, Columbia, and many other universities around the world, doing research. Also some of the larger organizations as far as corporates, and also SMEs in leadership and development space. We also, last year, for those of you that know SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, we won their Innovation Award. So we are in this space now for quite a few years. We started before LLMs became a thing. So we started using AI and machine learning a few years before that, and of course, this has helped us a lot. So what happened is, about January this year, Mayo Clinic came and asked us a question, two amazing researchers. This is Dr. Roberto Benzo. He has this, I think, rare combination of Dr. who is an extremely well-studied academic and a professor of medicine at the Mayo Institute, but also massive fan of behavioral change. And he's done a lot of work already on how can we get this doctor-patient interaction to become better. And He has had 20 plus years of projects that he receives funding from the National Institutes for Health in the US, which is probably one of the best places to get funding, the most competitive ones. So a lot of research. And also his daughter, who's an assistant professor, and she's also an ICF PCC coach and an incredible person to work with as well. So they came to us and said, look, we have a challenge, and would like to see how we can look at coaching, specifically coaching skills for doctors. Now, coaching skills for doctors is an interesting thing because how many of you have been to a doctor and felt incredibly good about the interaction that you've had? There's a doctor here who's raising their hands. With the exception of the doctor in the room, like, do we all agree that there is a certain level of communication or lack of communication with doctors, right? And by the way, what's really interesting is that communication has nothing to do with their ability as a doctor. They could be an absolutely incredible doctor. But unfortunately, most of the doctor-patient interactions are like these. That was my prompt to ChatGPT because what do you think most doctor-patient interactions are like? And it came up with something like this. Fair enough. And here's why it matters, if you don't already know that, but better diagnosis. One of the things that many times doctors do, they will hear the symptoms, they will make an assumption about what this person has. So I'm Alex, okay, Alex has a cold. And then I'm going home and talking about how my ankle hurts. And in the mind, I still have a cold, right? So actually, communication is massively important to get better diagnosis. Better adherence and outcomes. So adherence means I'm actually following through what the doctor says. In the US alone, problems with adherence is a 290 billion impact in their healthcare system because people don't follow through. 80% of that is conscious non-adherence. So when people say, I don't want to follow what the doctor says, and the vast majority of that is because of lack of trust between the patient and the doctor. It's purely down to communication. There's other reasons in the yes, of course, it's private healthcare, institutional and whatever else, but ultimately, if I trust what the doctor is telling me, I have a super high chance of following it through, and the impact is, I think, something like 200,000 avoidable deaths a year in the US, purely because of lack of adherence. A big chunk of that is down to trust the doctor and communication. Massive impact in satisfaction. That's really interesting because I live in the UK, we have a national health system, also in Germany. And we're in this sad situation where when I was speaking to someone in the NHS about what we do with Mayo Clinic and how they care about repeat, they care about people having a great experience so they come back. And their approach to the NHS today is purely about how many people can you see per day without caring at all about the quality of the interaction. Right? So it's a really interesting that the private healthcare system actually cares about satisfaction. And in the UK, at least I can guarantee you, NHS currently only cares about numbers and nothing else. So that's an important part. And also, malpractice lawsuits. People don't sue doctors in the US that did a bad job. They sue doctors that they don't like. So fundamentally, you could have done a mistake, right? But people like, oh, she's a human who made a mistake, right? Or you could have done nothing wrong and come across as a very arrogant person, and they will just go after you. And just to get that last point, 30% of malpractice lawsuits is down to break communication, most of it between doctor, provider, and patient, sometimes even between providers, to be honest. And there's a 55 billion cost to that, just to give you some idea of the numbers. And what we're talking about here is about words. We're literally talking about words. Okay, it's communication, not just words, but we're talking about that engagement and not about the quality of what is the service being provided. So, let us look. We already are doing some projects with telemedicine, Mayo Clinic, of course. There's full consent for people to record and analyze. There's high security and privacy protocols, if you're familiar in the US with HIPAA and the rest, so the data is very private and secure. We already have this in real conversations, and many of them are with the same patient and doctor over a period of time, which is very, very interesting, because that means that you can actually see how a relationship evolves. It's not just a one-off. It's actually, you can see how people are engaging, like we do in coaching, engaging in discussions, and of course they have thousands of discussions. Now, we've been in the space where we have trained AI and agents for different models, and our question is always, what angle are we taking? So what do we want the AI to look for? Because just getting the AI to assess something out of the blue without a point of reference is not really impactful. So that's when they told us about motivational interviewing. Who is familiar, out of curiosity, motivational interviewing? A few people here? Great. Okay. So for those of you that are not, I wasn't that familiar. I knew about it, but I wasn't that familiar. It's a model that has been developed over 40 years. It's now in its fourth iteration, and the whole idea is about how does a doctor engage with the patient in a better way. And I put some definitions here because they're so fascinatingly close to what our basic coaching principles are that are worth noticing. First of all, it's supposed to be a partnership, a collaborative partnership. So doctor-led, beyond advice, this is about really exploring people's feelings and get people to be motivated to change themselves. So number one, that's very different to what most of our experiences with doctors are. The second thing that I absolutely love, the power of change talk. People are far more likely to be persuaded by the reasons they discover and voice themselves. Would you all agree this is a fundamental coaching principle, right? Absolutely there. And evidence-based and effective. Huge research on this. With all respect to the ICF and EMCC and all the other different people with models out there, this is significantly better research. It's research in clinical environments. It has results. Here what you see is where there's different situations where there's large body of journals published based on this model. So it's a very robust model. It's complex, but it's robust, it's well researched, and it's effective. So that is a great place to start. And here were the challenges that these guys have. Okay, how do we do that? So they have started this project where they got trained doctors to coach patients. They have done that. But this is a project that they have which gets funding, some of the highest standards that you can get funding for, and it requires monitoring. And they have a model, which is the motivational interviewing treatment integrity model, where effectively the current way was for a human being that is an experienced doctor and an experienced MI practitioner and an experienced MI assessor to understand what someone is doing and market. That was happening. And guess what? That is extremely resource intensive. I mean, if there's anyone from ICF here, you know already how intensive it is even to do PCC or ICC or ACC, PCC, MCC sessions, right? Imagine this, where you actually need doctors that are trained on this, that are experienced, and that are trained on assessing that, right? So it's quite an interesting one. And of course, the question that you're asking is how much feasible it is, right? And the reality is, in most clinical settings, this was not feasible. It's very time and labor intensive. You don't have enough trainers, you don't have enough people out there that can do this, very slow feedback. That is really important as well. We all know that coaching is much more relevant when it's close to what we're coaching for. Right? It's a completely different thing to talk about something that happened today or yesterday or half an hour ago versus I've done a session, or in this case, a doctor-patient communication 2 months ago, and someone managed to look at it and give me some feedback. Right? That gap is so large, it almost loses its meaning, and this is where AI and specifically Ovida comes in. So what we've done there, we've already built a very, very secure API. So we're transferring data, following the US standards, HIPAA and the rest, to make sure that we're respecting privacy and security of everyone involved, always with the consent of the patient, of course, for this process. And then we started training AI agents based on the MI model to provide metrics and feedback. And the process for this is really interesting. We've done a few different models, including some of the coaching models, sales, leadership models in organization. And what we found is that the complexity of the model is not really the most important part. We have done some very complex models. It is how clear it is. And what I mean by that is, in this case, the MI model, which is a complex model, is actually very well defined. The behaviors are very well defined, is very clear. And that means that we're getting some good results already, which I'll show you in a moment. It's fully scalable. We can have high quality insights across practically all of the discussions, and the doctors can go straight onto a platform, pretty much see what's happening, and that's what we're building right now, and get feedback straight away. And because we have multiple interactions between doctor and the same patient, I can now see in context of my path, of my route with this patient, or what is happening, or what I can do better. And that's what ultimately leads to better coaching from doctors. Now, how do we ensure that AI matches human standards and goals, right? That is really the bigger question. And for that, one of the most important benefits that AI has that sometimes we forget is it's the first time in human history that you can get quantitative, statistically valid data on human communication. Even if it's not as accurate as a human might be, the reality is we can confirm and look back and see how accurate was it. What I mean by that is, and I've said that to anyone myself here? Right? A few years, okay. So last year in New York, I talked about, we did a study with PCC, right? We paid PCC assessors to come in and assess a few sessions independently. And the correlation between them, different times of session, was not very high. And that's a problem, because if you don't have the correlation there working, how can you get to a model or an AI that can actually reproduce that? But the beauty of doing this with AI is that you can always go back and improve what you're analyzing. So we're getting very, very high standards of statistical significance with the results that we're getting. Number two is we can look at the most important scores. So change talk, you remember the definitions about effectively helping people understand their motivations to change. We can actually get some really good scores about how people are interacting with that, how is the patient expressing themselves, and what doctors are doing over a series of sessions. We can identify missed opportunities. For example, hey, look at I have another 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. Already, you got the signal.
I'm ready to be bubbled. And then we can get behavioral accounts, and we've had some really incredible results. Some super experienced doctors assessing sessions, and in some elements that we've already done, like recall, we're getting 95% correlation between human and AI, which is a pretty incredible thing, because if you think these doctors are super experienced, very good at what they do, and trained in AI. Ultimately, the goals are these: trustworthy, accurate, best practice, aligned AI and feedback, and we want this. Roberto wants about to certified medical journal. I have 2 more slides and I'm done. So, opportunities. We're moving from a quality control that was 1% of all sessions to all of them. Right? That generates an enormous amount of insight that we could never have had. It was never possible, right? There was never enough doctors, people, I would argue coaching assessors that could ever do that. What did we learn about that? Then we have already started picking up that there will be some behaviors, even in this well-researched model, that are more important than others. And we can put statistical validity next to that. And we can actually look at how specific behavioral change, so if a doctor starts changing their behavior, how does that change the outcome? So connecting those 2 things is something that was not possible in any other way apart from having AI and AI agents to do that. And my final 3 points: engaging on this, security and privacy are first. In this case, it's even more important because we're talking about patient data. So, any type of project that needs to start with those principles. That, I think, is where everything will move in AI. I think generic insights, generic perspectives are going to be less and less useful. We want feedback based on who I am. My needs are going to be different to your needs. We want feedback based on the organization that we're working with. We want feedback based on the model that we're choosing to interact with. So anything that's generic, I don't think it will even exist in the next few years, because it doesn't make sense. What makes sense is tell me how I'm different. Imagine if we all went to a personal trainer and all of us do the same program. It's insane, right? We would all get an individual program based on our goals, who we are, and what we're doing. That's what AI needs to do, really. And what I think is the most important part is we need to get to a place where AI can deliver measurable on-the-job behavioral change, whether it is for doctors, whether it is for leaders, which we're doing a lot of work with in leadership, and for coaches as well. I did have a question mark slide in case someone does have a question. However, I think there's going to be a little hook to grab me off the stage very soon if I do that. So do we have any time for questions or not? We don't. Fair enough. I'm going to be around. Thank you very much for the engagement.